welcome to the Gen Z Show, brought to you by Generation Zigger. I'm your host, your weekly host. You see me every time on this call. I'm James McLamb. And I'm joined this week by two that you've seen before on this call as well, two of our favorite co-hosts, Leif Oswald from Minnesota and Sarah Beth McLamb from North Carolina. How are you doing, guys?
Doing good.
Oh, man. No, it's...
Today we are joined by an old friend of mine, someone I've known for almost 35 years now. And we, in fact, were college roommates for a period of time way back in the day at North Carolina State University, Mr. Jones Loflin. Now, Mr. Jones has been a teacher, an agriculture teacher early as a career, but he's been a speaker and trainer for almost 25 years now and has had extensive training and speaking experience, not just in his home state of North Carolina and not just across the nation, but all over the world. Sarah Beth, tell us a little bit more about Jones as you know him.
Well, I know Jones as a personal coach for me during my state office year for North Carolina FFA. And really what he does is he focuses on helping others live a better life, live on purpose. He focuses on work-life balance, and he is just an awesome speaker, awesome trainer, awesome coach. And he dedicates his life to his work, and it shows.
This call goes into really good coach. It's almost like a personal coaching session for me as he dives into how to really live life on purpose. Like, what was your major takeaway from our time with Jones today?
Well, James, as you said, like, this is a really fun call because I've listened into a lot of these, and what Jones really did is he actually gave us content. Like, he actually told us what we can do, but more importantly, he talked to everyone. I felt like the advice he gave wasn't to people who are in leadership roles. There aren't people who are in their 40s. There aren't people who are just in high school. It is for everyone in between that group. And so it was really cool to just see that, when he was giving content, I was saying to myself, I was like, I can use this advice. People I know can use this advice. My parents could use this advice. I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's not going to keep it until you pay for it. He just wants to get it out there so you can live your life better, as Sarah Beth said.
He's really a man of character and integrity, and you're going to enjoy and learn a lot from our time today with Mr. Jones Loflin. I want you to subscribe to this channel and share this episode because someone you know needs to hear what you're about to hear. So let's go straight to our call with Mr. Jones Loflin. Well, I want to welcome Jones to the show today. How are you doing, Jones?
I'm doing fantastic, James. Hope you are.
I'm doing great. And for the audience and the intro that Leif and Sarah and I just recorded for you, I alluded to the fact that you and I have been friends now for well over 30 years, almost 35 years, probably somewhere in that regard.
Absolutely. I had hair whenever I first knew you. Yes.
It's funny you said that. I was looking for your first book that you gave me, The Primary Epitome. Is that? And I remember on the cover, I wanted to show it on the cover because it was a character review and it had the big hair on the cover. But I could not find it. And my wife thinks it's upstairs in the library upstairs, not in my office somewhere. So welcome to the show.
Oh, what an honor. I love what you guys do at Gen Z and how you're preparing people, students. If I said young people, my daughter would beat me because she says, nobody likes that term, Dad. So, but how you're preparing students to lead. And certainly if there's anything we need leaders with integrity and character now more than ever. So I'm just honored to be on here to have this discussion.
Well, a lot of our audience may be familiar with you, especially those who are from your home state of North Carolina, but so many of them are across the nation, may not know, this may be their first encounter with you. So introduce them as you want and tell them what you would like for them to know about you.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I am based out of North Carolina. My background includes agricultural education as well as serving as a national FFA officer while I was at NC State University. Beyond that, I taught for a few years and then wanted to go out and do some different kinds of things. And my wife was gracious enough to say, I'll give you 5 years to figure it out. If you don't figure it out, go find a real job. And so I started speaking and training primarily to youth audiences at that point, because that was my background. Then in 2000, moved more into the corporate role. And so my focus now, more than anything else, is helping others with the struggle of too much to do, whether that be in the workplace or just trying to figure life out. I mean, there's so many choices we have to make. And so that's where I've kind of found my space in the training, the coaching market, is helping folks begin to cut through the clutter and begin to decide, how do I make the best choices each day that get me to the outcome I'm looking for in my work, in my personal life, and with my relationships.
Well, that is really what I wanted, why I really reached out to you, is to talk about that particular subject of having too much to do. It's different than when you and I were young, and that we felt some stress, I think, through our high school and college careers, but a lot of it was self-imposed, that we were putting ourselves under deadlines. No one was really forcing us. I didn't feel forced to do much, but depending on where you get your statistics, the millennial generation and now the Gen Z generation, anywhere from 30 to 40% of them feel overwhelmed in life, feeling stressed. And that can be, through school, it can be through social issues, family issues, traumatic life experiences, or just world issues. They're feeling overwhelmed. So what is your initial thoughts on that kind of concept or that stat?
Oh, sure. I would almost thought it was higher. I'm surprised to hear it's even at that level, because there's such tremendous expectations. We as parents, okay, let's just call it what it is. We as parents, we as a society have put on students to have so many things figured out. And while yes, there can the case be made that, okay, have we done, too much for them? That's another conversation for another day. But there's so many tremendous expectations. A great book that I read, probably a year ago, was called Range. And it talked about how generalists always do better than specialists. And it talked about how we put such enormous pressure on students to figure it out. And then we put them in this lane, and then we don't let them get out of it, and they get into their early 20s or maybe into their first job, and they go, it's not what I want to do. But then there's this enormous pressure to stay there instead of saying, okay, how do you want to grow? What do you want to be learning about? What does your future, look like? And then trying to take bits and pieces from all those experiences, maybe even from very different industries or career, paths. And then how do you begin to bring that to bear in your late 20s, your early 30s, to begin to really have a meaningful career? So I think it starts with the expectations that we placed on them. And then secondly, we can't deny the effect of technology. There's just so much information coming at all of us, not just students, but all of us. There's so much information coming at us that can cause us to go, okay, where should I be? Should I be this person? Should I be that person? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? That it just really can be overwhelming.
So if you're coaching some young people and they're coming to you saying, I'm just overwhelmed with life, what advice do you start with on them, or what steps or strategies do you start with to help them?
Sure. The first thing is I applaud them for stopping. You can't make a course correction if you're still moving. So I applaud them for just stopping to say, am I going in the right direction? I am overwhelmed. The second thing is I think you have to get specific. In fact, I talk about, from one of my books, Juggling Elephants, I talk about get specific about your elephants. What's really heavy to you? And whether it's coaching or training or whatever, I'll start giving them some possibilities. I say, okay, here's a list, pick one. And they'll look at me, sometimes they'll go, can I pick 12? I'm like, no, pick one. And so I encourage them to pick one, and then let's talk about it. Let's work on that. Because so often people will say, I say, what's so heavy to you right now? They'll go, everything. I'm like, that's not helpful. I can't deal with everything, but I can help you deal with one at a time. And so if I start that student there, they can usually go, well, it's this. Okay. Well, let's work on that. And then once you address that one, that gives you the physical, mental, and emotional energy to deal with some of the other ones. And in fact, James, one of the things I encourage you to start with a small one. I'm a big fan of, Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University. And one of the things that's always I've loved about his training is the debt snowball. We think we got to start with the biggest one. No. You start with a small one to get momentum. I think it's the same way when we're overloaded. If your overload is just, dealing with your annoying roommate, but you say, well, that's kind of small, that's okay. Let's deal with the annoying roommate, figure that one out, and then we'll go tackle your course schedule or your life plan, somewhere down the road.
Do you remember that movie, and I can't think of the name of it right now, with Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray, where Richard Dreyfuss was the psychologist and Bill Murray was the neurotic patient? And Richard Dreyfuss's whole premise of a book he had written was called Baby Steps. And you have to take baby steps in life to get where you are. Yeah. And Bill Murray was neurotic, so neurotic, he wouldn't even want to walk outside the door because he was scared. So he was reading the book going, I got to take baby steps. And literally, he was just taking little baby steps, going out and going crossing the road. When you said that, it reminded me of that. I can't think of the name of that movie. Great movie, though. I can't think of the name of that.
That's okay.
You two guys are looking at me like having no clue what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, and it goes back to something else. Talk about movies. A really great movie I finally saw during the pandemic, which reaffirmed this concept to me of, naming what's overloading you, is It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I think that was it with Tom Hanks, Mr. Rogers. There's a great moment in that movie where Tom Hanks, Mr. Rogers, has gone to visit this person he's befriended, and this person's dad is terminally ill. And so he walks in there with his wife, and the whole family's gathered around this guy who's, in the hospital bed, and he's really sick. And so they do their pleasantries, but everybody gets quiet because what do you talk about when you got a guy who's dying in the room? And Mr. Rogers sitting there and he's like, well, death is a difficult thing to talk about. But death is it's a human condition. It's something we all have to face. And if we can discuss it, then we can do something about it. And then he said, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And I think that's a key place that we have to start is what is overloading you and getting specific about it. And then, okay, what are some tangible steps, baby steps? I love your example. What are some baby steps I can take to address it, over that period of time?
Movie was What About Bob? That was the name of the movie, What About Bob? I knew it would come to.
That's great.
Well, so after we start identifying what's overwhelming us and taking those baby steps, I'm wondering after we do that, how do we identify what's most important in our life? And then we only have 24 hours in the day. That's not different for anybody in the world. Everyone has 24 hours. How do we take those priorities? How do we identify them? And then how do we manage that throughout the 24 hours we're given?
Sure. Great question, Sarah Beth. I think the first thing you hit on is what are the priorities? So many people can't even, prioritize. They think that everything should be a priority. Well, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And so I like to teach students and adults the same. What are some filters you can begin to ask yourself that help you set priorities? What has long-term consequences? What are the deadlines involved here? What's the danger in not taking action on this now? Who's asking for it? That's especially in a corporate environment, when you're trying to determine priorities. Who's waiting on information? I think there's any list of questions you can ask yourself to help you begin to say, what should my priorities be? And then I think once you've gotten some clarity on that, then it is saying, okay, if that's a priority, where does it need to fit in your day that you focus on that or work on that? I am a huge proponent of not keeping, or not living your day by a task list. In fact, I get real, put out or frustrated with people who, oh yeah, I work from a task list and I do fine. No, you don't. When you work from a task list, you tackle the easiest tasks to get done because that's the way your brain works. Your brain doesn't like, things that are heavy and hard. And so if you're looking, okay, yeah, I could do that. Oh no, that one's easy. That's the one you're going to go do. So I'm a huge proponent of once you identify those priorities, what are those tangible actions that you can put in your day and where do they go? What kind of time block? When are you going to work on that type of mentality? And then once you can do that, then it becomes the matter of execution versus, oh, what should I do with my time today? And you waste so much momentum because you don't have a plan.
And for just wondering, so we've had a lot of conversations over the past year. And I'm a yes person. If you ask me to do something, I'm going to say yes. It doesn't matter what it is, unless, it's something crazy. I'm probably going to say yes. So I know I'm not the only yes person out there. What advice would you give to us when it comes to identifying those priorities and having 24 hours to really think about what we're going to do tangibly? What advice do you have for us yes people?
I have the best book you will ever read on the subject. You know what's even better? I don't have it. I mean, I've got it. It's over there, but we won't get to that. But I have the best concept in the world to manage that yes mentality. And the book is called The Power of a Positive No by William Ury. And it's 3 simple words that help yes. In fact, I just finished a coaching call before this session where I was walking someone through it who has the same challenge there, Beth. And here's the way it works. It goes yes with an exclamation point, no with a period, and then yes with a question mark. Now, here's the way it works. Sarah Beth, I might come to you and ask you, Sarah Beth, I really would like for you to serve on the advisory team for this upcoming student event, this collegiate event. And you're going, oh, I don't want to let Jones down, but I've got all this other stuff going on. I just don't. And so your tendency is to feel like, well, I don't want to tell him no, so I'll just say yes. Well, William Ury would say, yeah, you start out with yes, but the yes looks like this. Jones, right now, I am really trying to focus on this class, or I am really working on developing this, because if I don't get it done by whatever deadline, I'm just not going to be in a good place. So that's the yes. You say yes to yourself, your team, your priorities, and that you start with yes. Then the no is, Jones, I'm just going to tell you no as being part of that advisory team. And it's a logical no. It's a logical no because you've explained the yes so well. And then the yes with a question mark, oh, this is when it just gets beautiful. This is when you would look at me and say, Jones, I can't, serve on the advisory team, but if you have a single event coming up where you could just use somebody to pitch in and help, I can do something like that. Would you be willing to call me on, for something like that? And I'm going, yes, Sarah Beth, of course. But it's a fantastic strategy to use. Yes, no, yes, because you speak your priorities. And just verbalizing them is huge, because we think it, I'd really like to say no to Jones because I really want to focus on something I need to get done. But we never verbalize that. And a lot of times when we verbalize that, somebody's going to go, oh, wow, I didn't know. I didn't know you had that going on in your life. And so it makes sense for you to turn this down. But then giving that alternate suggestion of something that wouldn't be as taxing for you is a way for you to not feel like you're letting them down. Because that's you have a servant's heart, Sarah Beth, like so many of the Gen Z folks I know do. And so it's hard to feel like you're not being able to serve them. You still can, but just don't violate your priorities in the process if possible.
I love that. I feel like you've shared it with me before too, but hearing it again, wow, I love that so much.
Oh, I get more emails about people who are implementing that strategy than probably some of my own stuff. And I'm fine with that. I mean, that's why I get so excited about it. I'm not being arrogant right now because it's not my idea. It's somebody else's. So.
Well, hey, I want to actually go in actually a different direction than what Sarah Beth was saying. I think for the first time, this generation has experienced quite the opposite of quarantine hit. And all of a sudden we're like, what do we do? And I remember chatting with so many students and being like, so what are you up to these days? And they're like, Leif, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And so what kind of advice do you have for our generation now that we're in quarantine, not having everything to do? How do we dig into our priorities? How do we do meaningful work that digs into our priorities and makes us feel accomplished throughout our day?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leif. I think the first thought there, again, once you have clarity on your priorities, it is, what are those tangible actions that you could take, to begin to, live out those priorities or to get things done. And not to sound simplistic, but I think what you just did with me is key, is asking the question. One of the things that we have done probably innocently. I don't think there's malicious intent, but you know, we sometimes discount, or we have made it uncomfortable for students, college age students, to raise their hand and go, I got a question here. You know, help me, walk me through this. And I think sometimes it's important for us as leaders, as adults of whatever age, to be open to that and say, let me see where you're at with that. You know, what are some steps you could possibly take? I can say this: in my coaching of people your age, I sometimes offer suggestions that they go, wow, I hadn't thought of that. I'm like, really? That hadn't crossed your mind? But they had just gotten so caught up in, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Okay, but could you do this in that time? Example, a few weeks ago, I was coaching someone who wants to take better care of their health. Now, this is a late 20s something, so somebody just a tad older, but they're really struggling because they want to get back into great shape. They used to be a college athlete. And I said, well, how much time do you need to work out? And they said, oh, I need about an hour a day. And so we were looking through their schedule, and they're like, it's not happening, Jones. I'm like, okay. Do you take a lunch break? They're actually working in a physical workspace. They said, well, yeah, I do. I said, how long is this? Well, we get an hour. I said, would you have about 15 minutes? You could probably get out and walk around the parking lot. And they're like, yeah, I could do that. I'm like, how about that's your exercise for now? And they're like, but that's not the hour. I said, but it's more than you're doing now. You know, it's helping people, going back to the baby steps. James, you got the quote of the day so far, but it's that whole idea of helping them understand how they can take the next step, not 12 steps or 14 or 16, but what's the first step you could take in the right direction? Then let's see what we've learned, and then take the next one. So I went around the world with my answer to your question, but I think it starts with asking that question of someone. What do you see that I could do? I'm feeling lost, or I'm not finding a meaningful direction here. What do you see? How could you help me? And especially in this season, people have time to offer that advice, when in other seasons they still had time, but they might have made other excuses.
Sure.
You mentioned how you've had the opportunity to coach recently a lot of Gen Z and young millennials. Based on that coaching experience and even some of the training experience, what has been some of the top practical suggestions that you've been able to give them? Because I'm sure there's someone watching this right now or listening to it, and they're going, all right, these are great concepts. Give me something I can do now. So what are 3 things I can do today? You know, someone who's a high D like me who wants to know, what is the end goal? Give me the bottom line. Give it to me now.
Yeah. Okay, James, I'll take your challenge. I'll give you 3. The first one is to, and I'll wrap it with, be curious. And when I say be curious, I mean, it's that whole asking questions arena. There is so much that we've got to do better at as a country, as a world, in having better conversations, being better listeners. But it starts with being curious. I was coaching someone yesterday who's of this young millennial group, and they were talking about their frustration in trying to deal with someone who's got a different perspective on a particular topic. And I said, well, be curious. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, just be curious. I'm curious. What brought you to that perspective? I'm curious what experiences have caused you to have that thought, or to be on that side of that issue or that argument or whatever it might be. But just asking questions of that other person. We don't have to have the answer. We just need to be able to ask questions to understand where they're coming from, and then find that common ground that allows us to move forward. And so I think that's one of my strongest recommendations is to be curious, ask better questions. There's 3 words that anybody listening to me today can add or use in a question, and it will completely change the dynamic, and it's help me understand. Help me understand where you got that perspective. Help me understand what makes you feel that way. You're not saying why, which is judgmental. You're saying, help me understand. And it's a beautiful way to introduce differences of perspectives and opinions. So the first one is to be curious. The second idea I think is really important for this age group is to take the right next step. the right next step. And it goes back again to what we've talked about already today, but we've put such expectations on ourselves and others that we've got to have everything planned out. But what's the right next step? And you know, what's a conversation you could have? What's something you could research? You know, what's something you could look at that might give you information? And then once you get there, then you can make the next, you know, choice. It goes back to the quote that's on my bio that I put in my full bio that I send to clients, and it's by Zig Ziglar, which says, "Go as far as you can see by faith, and when you get there, you can see farther or further." I'm not sure which is further or farther, but the whole idea is, what's the right next step? You know, what's the little thing you could begin doing, get feedback, and then do something else. So that's the second one. And then I think the third one that is really important is developing healthy relationships. Developing healthy relationships. I'll just say it. I'll be the old guy on the call today. There is this idea that what's the people we are connected with on social media are our friends, and many times they are to some degree, but developing those deeper relationships with people who are willing to call you out when you're not making decisions that are in alignment with your priorities and your values, to be that first person who will come and be your cheerleader, who the one you can go to and say, "Hey, I'm just a terrible person." No, you're not. You know, look at this. You know, look at all these great things you're doing. I just think that's really important for this group, is to develop those deeper relationships. By the way, I also think it's really important for my age group, because some of the people that I work with, I go, you know, who do you go to when you want to just, you know, do the verbal vomit thing? And they'll go, "I don't have anybody." I'm like, maybe that's where we need to start, you know, because we all need those deeper relationships. And that's shown up during COVID more than anything, is that you can go virtual all you want, but until we can get face to face and have those really genuine conversations, we just can't be our authentic selves as much as we'd like to be.
I write these down because I use these sessions as free coaching sessions, these calls. People think it's for Generation Z. No, it's for me. So to reiterate, be curious, take the next right step, and develop healthy relationships. So for you to write, and they'll be in the notes. I'm going to write those down in the show notes as well.
Well, I have a question. So relationships, that third one is one that I know personally I can call myself out on right now. Like, since COVID, I feel like that's an area that I have been struggling in. So for me and for everyone else who might feel like they're struggling in building relationships and growing existing ones, what advice do you have, and how can we use those relationships to work towards our goals and help others work towards their own goals? Like, what can we do?
Yeah, wow. There's a lot there, Sarah Beth. So I will try to answer some of it, and then you can tell me the 14 areas I didn't answer of your question of that one. I think in coaching, when I've got someone who's in that situation, then I will say, do you have 3 people in your life that you can be honest with, that, you know, will accept you for who you are, that you can be honest with? And most time people come up with 1 or 2, and I'll say, great. And part of their action plan is they are to reach out to at least 2 of those people and say, you know what? I am looking for someone in my life who I can develop deeper relationship with. I've realized during COVID that I've kind of isolated myself, and I need that in my life. You know, someone who will call me to account, who will be willing to support and encourage me. And you know what? I thought of you. And just leave it there. And it's amazing. I get reports back from people who will say, you know what? I was scared to death to say that to them because I thought they were going to just go, who are you? But said they were like, wow, you too? Man, yeah, I love that. Now, some of those people you start down that path with are going to fall away because they're just not comfortable with that. But I think we have to be the ones who step up or raise our hand, whatever the language is, and say, I want that in my life. And be upfront with people and say, I'm looking to develop that, because gosh knows we got enough casual relationships in our life. So I think that's the first step of that process is just find those people and have a deeper conversation with them. The second one is to be willing to be vulnerable. about what you're struggling with, what you're trying to accomplish, because we all put on this, my pastor Luke Jackson talks about, we all put on the stock photo, that oh, life is wonderful, whether it's social media or wherever, but let people into who we really are. And if you've done your first part right, the second part's not difficult, because then that makes you real. It makes that other person, able to go, wow, now I know I can talk about some of those things with me. And then the third piece of that is, I think, is not using such a negative word, but developing some accountability between the two of you. I need you to do this for me. This would really help me if you would call me out if you see me start doing this. Or accountability from the standpoint of a goal standpoint. I'm really working on wanting to do this, and I need you to call me out if I don't do it. Or if we do it, let's go celebrate and do this. But I think that accountability piece is important, because that's how we grow deeper with each other, is holding each other accountable. Now, if I was going to add a fourth one, it would be do something together. How do we grow deeper with each other? We do things, whether it's a service project or whether it's just going out. And I know we have to be careful in COVID, and I understand that, but it's actually engaging in experiences that give us things to talk about, and give us things to springboard off of about what's important to us and that kind of thing. So Sarah Beth, those are some initial ideas I would have. Tell me anything that I missed in that, and I'll try to come back to it.
No, that was awesome. I loved all 4 of those answers, even the bonus one there. That was really great. I loved it.
Well, thank you. And please understand, let me do this disclaimer. I am still trying to figure all this stuff out. Sometimes people will talk, oh, wow, you must have it all together. I'm like, you don't have a clue, and I'll have it all figured out when I'm dead, and then it won't matter. So there we go.
Lacey had something?
I think, this is my first encounter and interaction with you, and I just am kind of taking it all in, because I think of the people in our lives we can really learn from. And I guess my question for you is that, how did you figure out this is what you want to do? How did you find your priorities? We talked a lot about priorities. How did you find those 3 Ps? How did you figure out that this is what you wanted to end up doing with your life? When your wife gave you 5 years to figure it out, what brought you here?
Yeah.
And at 4 years and 11 months, you still were wondering if you got it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can tell you, I am grateful for the FCCLA, because they signed me to a contract for doing 5 presentations, and it put me up to where I needed to be income-wise. And so if it hadn't been for FCCLA, I might be doing something else these days. I love that question. And, part of my purpose that I look at every day is to have the desired impact on my world each day. And so I could go into what desired impact looks like for me, but I had it as a teacher, I felt. And then when I went into speaking and training initially, I said, I can make an impact there. And so really, there have been several places in my life where I felt like I was having the impact I wanted to have. What propelled me more to probably initially start speaking and training is that as a teacher, here I am telling students, yeah, you need to go out and try new things, not be afraid to take risk. And I'm going, and you're not. Okay, well, yeah, I guess I should practice what I'm preaching to my students. And so that got me into speaking and training, and I love the impact that I get to have there. The other piece was this whole time management, work-life balance piece. That's really been where I have loved being, because if people get that right, they live life with no regrets. And I have heard way too many people in my journey talk about, oh, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that. I see people being lousy parents when they'll sit around going, hey, I'd love to be a better parent. I'm like, well, I could help with that, but I'm not going to push myself right now. But I know the impact it can have. And sometimes it's better, Leif, to explain something with a story versus try to expound upon it. I was working with Hilton Hotels several years ago, and a guy came walking up to me, and he held up a copy of Juggling Elephants, and he asked me to sign it. And of course, I was honored by that. I was a very humbling moment. But then he said, your book saved my marriage. And I'm like, yes, that's it. That's it. Something I had written or co-written with someone helped someone live a better life and help someone not have some of the stress that others have. That solidified, moments like that have solidified for me that I'm in the right place. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. It's not. I lost 90% of my income once COVID hit, as far as canceled programs and trainings and those kind of things. But even in those tough moments, I know I'm in the right spot because of the response I get from people when I share an idea or a thought that works. I got a bunch that don't, but of the ones that I do.
That's awesome. I think everyone's looking for their way to make an impact. I think yours definitely shines.
Well, thank you. And to that point, I love that question. How can you make an impact? And wherever we are, whatever we're doing, we can all have an impact. And in fact, that's one of those places that as COVID has hit, that I think people have forgotten about, or that's what really got them frustrated, is that, okay, I can't go to work and have an impact. I can't, go on campus and have an impact with my students or my club or my organizations. And I think the question becomes, well, how can you make an impact where you are? And perfect example where I didn't realize that, my daughter Sydney, she's an amazing young lady. She started really struggling when the pandemic first hit, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with her. And the reason was because Sydney's a very touchy-feely, affectionate kind of young lady. She loves hugging her friends and high-fiving and all this. Well, because of COVID, she was home a lot, and she certainly wasn't getting to be around her friends a lot. And I'm going, wow, what can I do to be a better dad right now? And finally one day I realized I just need to hug her more. I mean, that sounds stupid. I'll say it's stupid. It sounds stupid for a dad to say, I need to be hugging my daughter more. But I noticed I'd be a little more intentional when I would, go up for lunch, my home office in the basement. I would go up for lunch and I would say, hey, Sydney, how's your day going? Or when I go to tell her goodnight, I'd put my arm around her or something. No clue that I could have an impact by doing something that small. But when I stopped to say, how can I have an impact where I am? That's what led me to make different choices. And so it doesn't matter what somebody's doing, we can all have impact. It's just making those choices in the moment that we know can make a difference in somebody's life. I think that's important.
John, that kind of brings you back full circle to what you started with when you said you admire the young people who just want to stop and assess where they are. And you had to stop and assess where you were to see what kind of impact I needed to make now.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a benefit of this kind of situation that we're in, is that we stopped doing the things that we were doing, some because they were good things, some
right.
because they were the routine that we were doing. And we have to assess, now what do I do to be that impact going forward? So
yeah.
kind of a benefit, side benefit is slowing down and seeing, what's a different way or a different avenue for us to make a bit impact going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I initiated this month was a focus on purpose, and it's been really interesting because during this season, a lot of people have lost sight of their purpose, of their priorities, of their values even, because they couldn't carry them out in a way that they were comfortable with or they were used to. And so I've enjoyed some opportunities to work with people and say, okay, how can you carry out your purpose in this virtual environment? And there are ways to do it. Granted, they may not have the full impact that it would otherwise, but at least making that attempt is critical, because then it gives you, as I said before, the feedback to say, well, okay, what else could I do? Or what could I do differently? So you're spot on, James, with that. The value of stopping to see what might need to change.
I'm going to jump right in on this, because I've been wanting to ask this question for about 3 minutes now, and it's led perfectly. So we were talking about stopping what we were currently doing and starting to really just assess where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about purpose. So how can we start living on purpose exactly where we're at? What does that entail? And what advice do you have so we can start living on purpose like today, right where we're at?
Let's see. This session is what, 3 hours? Is that right? So we got 3 hours.
I was thinking that. I was like, that's a big question.
Yeah. Wow, that was huge. No, and I think there's some simple things that we can do, Sarah Beth, to kind of begin to capture that. And one of those things is to ask ourselves, when do we feel most alive? When do we feel like all our energy is engaged in the moment? A question I ask in coaching sometimes is, what are you doing that caused you to forget to eat? And it's funny because you hear this pause on the phone or on the Zoom, and then they'll go, well, when I'm doing this, wow, I just lose all track of time. And I'll go, okay, what's the cognitive principles there? What's going on inside your head that causes you to forget about eating? And normally it's things like, well, it's just solving a problem, or it's helping someone, or whatever. So I think, just asking yourself some questions. What causes you to forget to eat? What causes you to feel really zoned in? And what's behind that? I think that kind of begins to give us an idea of what our purpose is. I think then you can do some of the traditional things like, what are some of the stories you want people to tell about you? What are some of the stories that you want people to tell about you? That tells a lot about what you see in yourself. But then what's really cool, you talk about developing friends or developing relationships, throw that question at them. When I die, at 94, what's a story you'd want to tell about me at my funeral? Or, hey, if there's a celebration of my life at some point, what's a story you'd want to tell about me that you think would help other people see who I am? And I mean, that's a great question to pose to someone who you've got a positive relationship with, because you'll get a lot of insights about what's important to you. And then simply asking, purpose is usually connected to wanting to make an impact on others. There are very few people in this world whose purpose is solely about themselves. We've all met some of those people. We don't typically like to be around them. But if your purpose is about impacting others, how do you want to impact others? How do you want people to feel when, you've engaged with them or experienced it? And capturing those words. I mean, it's really a tangible exercise. And then from that saying, okay, how do I live that out every day? If one of the impacts I want to have is I want people to feel encouraged, okay, what's the step I can take today that will help people feel encouraged? You blend that into every social media post that you respond to. You blend that into every conversation you have. You really make it something so tangible that you can't help but live out your days on purpose. But I think it starts with the real ethereal, if you will, and then working our way down to, okay, how does that play out? A great strategy. The book, the Triggers, Marshall Goldsmith. I'll get it out in a minute. Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith. He talks about daily questions and asking ourselves daily questions that help us make sure we're aligned on purpose. But he says, keep the questions simple. Like, did I invest, 2 to 3 minutes encouraging someone today? Did I spend 5 minutes on self-care today? I mean, you'll come up with some really tangible questions that you can gauge yourself on at the end of the day to go, did I do this today? I mean, I think the ultimate example of this is Benjamin Franklin, The Art of Virtue. Where he took a virtue a week, and then he figured out how to, work through his day to live out that virtue. I think it's the same thing. Once we've identified our purpose, what are those tangible things we can do to live it out?
Jones, I want to thank you for the advice and the free coaching that you have given me and these two as well today. I want to thank you for that and the insight that you provided with this. I know that some of our audience is going to want to know more and want to engage with you more. Where can they connect with you? How can they connect with you and find out more about what you do and what you have to offer?
Sure, absolutely. I'm sure you're going to put it in the show notes, but my website is the best place to start, jonesloflin.com. You can go there and begin to figure out a little bit more about the things that I do. The other places, of course, is any place on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, especially LinkedIn, because I know that your group is up and coming, looking at careers and those things. I love connecting on LinkedIn because it gives me a chance to watch and learn from your journey, Leif and Sarah Beth. I'll say that to you. And so I love the opportunities to connect there. And then I would say, James, to your audience, if there's anything I've said today that you kind of go, kind of like to chat more about that. I am always open to a phone conversation, a Zoom meeting of some kind. So be sure and put my email in those show notes. Be more than happy to set up a call because I love learning. I learn so much from people like you. It's not about me having all the knowledge in the room. That's not it. We learn from each other. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten off a call with somebody like you, Sarah Beth, or you, Leif, and I went, wow, I learned so much just listening, being curious, remember, being curious about things going on in your world. So please feel free to reach out to me for any type of guidance, help, support, or just cheerleading that I could do for you.
Thank you for your time with us. And to our audience that's listening, all that information is down below in the show notes. And did I get it right, Leif? I know you think it's funny that I have problems.
He's looking a little old here in his use of technology, isn't he?
It's in your show notes. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to share this episode with your friends. Until next week, have a good week, Gen Z.